All right. Good morning. Looks like we're live here. So thank you for joining with us here this morning for our next episode of Ask the Agronomist. As you can tell, we're back to the boring old format here, and I could turn the camera around to show you there's no Heather here today. Very sad about that Heather's not able to join us this morning. I know you are as well. She has to be in New Berlin today for a meeting. And New Berlin is a long ways from Monmouth, so she was not able to join us here this morning. So we're going back to the old format for this episode. I have gotten good feedback on the new format, and Heather and I are still trying to perfect that. And we look forward to bringing you more episodes with the new and improved format for Ask the Agronomist in the future. And starting to make plans for our season ending episode. I reached out to a potential guest host this morning. Have not heard back yet, but we'll probably have a couple more episodes here this year, and we'll end the season as we normally do with a special guest host. We'll be remote live from somewhere. Not ready to make any announcements yet, but haven't figured out what we're going to do for our season-ending giveaway. But if anybody has any suggestions that are within our budget here at Ask the Agronomist, which is pretty small, let us know what you'd like for prizes. So today I'm going to do a little bit of a season recap and answer address a lot of complaints, I guess. So we get complaints every year. Not about Ask the Agronomist specifically, although there are complaints about that as well, but more about the season and what went wrong in the season and what didn't perform as well as people wanted them to. And I've made a list here, and I've had a couple dealer meetings, and I've asked my dealers to give me some feedback on my list of complaints. So that's my list, and we'll get into some more detail of that. And if you think of let's see, got a question already, Ryan. All right, field of black sand, high fertility, corn on corn, 4 years going to beans, history of crown rot, other diseases, normally 30 and stripping. Should we rip field this year? Okay, so the question is related to tillage and crown rot and 4 years of corn going to beans. No, I don't think there's any reason to rip that field, Ryan. If you were going back to a 5th year of corn, maybe. But some tillage I think would be beneficial, and we'll probably talk about that in an upcoming episode. I am seeing a trend where, especially with early planted soybeans, true no-till soybeans are struggling to keep up with tillage, and I'm talking about more than just vertical tillage as well. So I would say true tillage is here, vertical tillage is here, straight no-till is here. Sometimes the gap between here and here is 3 or 4 bushel. Sometimes it's 10. And really, I think what's going on, it's not a tillage thing as much as it is a residue thing. And growers have reported to me that, hey, when I no-till soybeans, the spot in the field where we baled corn stalks did a lot better. The spot in the field where we had a field fire and burned the corn stalks off did a lot better. The spot where my corn planter, was on the fritz the year before and I didn't plant any corn was a lot better. So removing the residue or burying the residue or helping the residue decompose faster is a benefit to the following year's early planted soybean crop. When we were planting soybeans in the middle of May and happy when they made 60, it didn't seem to make much difference. If you're going to plant soybeans the first half of April and you're hoping they make 90, it makes a difference. So I would do something to those stalks, Ryan, but I don't think necessarily ripping is absolutely necessary. The other thing I would say is it's you said a black sand. So if there's nematode pressure, cyst nematode pressure in this field, which if it's a sandy soil, in my experience, that means yes, there is nematode pressure in that field. Be careful about getting in a big rush to plant soybeans early. So I've seen a trend. Other people have talked about this as well. I don't think it's just me, where early planted soybeans with heavy cyst pressure are not doing well at all. And we're so used to early planted soybeans being better. Well, if you've got a high nematode count, those cyst nematodes are very active in cool, wet soils. Well, what is it in early April? It's cool and wet. So the nematode activity in those fields is really intense at that time. And so much damage is done to those young soybeans as they're trying to get established. They just never fully recover from that. And the cysts get ahead of them and they keep ahead of them. So be careful, either use a really strong cyst bean or be a little bit patient about planting your beans on sandy soils with high nematode counts. Early planted soybeans might not be for you if that's the environment that you're planting soybeans into. A couple questions from Adam already. So man, I love this, guys. You're obviously nobody wanted to hear my list of complaints, and so I'm getting questions coming in already to keep me from getting into my list. That's awesome. So corn stalks and bottoms and no-till next spring at an average or later date, 5-1 or till level plant early 410. Okay, so corn stalks and bottoms and no-till. So this is going to soybeans, I assume, Adam. Let's see. Anything exciting coming for a better nematode control? Okay, so Adam is slamming me with questions here this morning. So thanks, Adam. I'm going to take your last one first. So anything exciting coming for nematode control? So from us, not particularly. We are continuing to work with Peking source resistance. I have, I think, had some success getting our breeding group and product management to lower the bar a little bit on the yield requirements for Peking source varieties, because the environment where we need Peking cyst resistance, you're not going to get 80 bushel out of those fields anyway. We got to get to 60 before we can get to 80. So I think we've had the bar set a little too high in our breeding program for Peking. And if you lower the bar a little bit, all of a sudden you've got lots of Peking options. And so there are breeding programs that are churning out a lot of Peking beans. And in our Alloy brand, we do have lots of Peking options. I continue to believe that Peking in a non-high cyst pressure environment is not going to yield up with a good PI 88788 cyst source bean. But there are people who would disagree with me on that, and there are always exceptions to every rule. But there is some new nematode technology, being developed by other companies in the marketplace. We have evaluated that technology. We were not terribly impressed with it, passed on it. Other people thought it looked pretty cool. They're running with it. Yet to be seen. A lot of nematode technologies have come and gone. A lot of big promises have been made. A lot of hype, a lot of high expectations, and so far they have all fallen short. So we'll see. That's my expectation for this next technology as well. But we shall see. Crop rotation, Peking source resistance. Maybe using rye in a cover crop. There are things that help. Certainly, seed treatments like Olivo that have some nematode activity. That can help. On corn, I wish everyone was using counter on their corn. I know you herbicide guys might cringe at that a little bit because of some of the restrictions on herbicides, but most of the products we're using today don't have those sort of restrictions. Back when we used a lot of ALS chemistry, that was a bigger deal. But in corn, counter will absolutely help on certain species of nematodes. Not all of them, but it will at least help on some of them. N314 is our new corn nematicide that's on a lot of DeKalb hybrids. That helps. But with nematodes, there's a lot of things that help and nothing that fixes the problem. So that's kind of been the challenge with nematodes. So Adam, your second question there, I'm going in reverse. What's average yield gain on early planted beans? Boy, that you know the answer to that, right, my friend? It depends. Depends on the year, depends on the bean, it depends on the maturity. I would say last year, 2024, probably the biggest difference we've ever seen. It was probably a consistent 10 bushel plus in 2024. Sometimes, more than that. In 25, I don't think it's as big as it was in 24. You might disagree with me on that. I don't know what your experience has been. Soybean yields in 25 to me have been wonkier than usual. There's been beans in the 50s, there's been beans in the 90s, everything in between. There's been early beans that were really good. There's been late beans that were really good. When I say late, I mean like a 3.9 or a 4.0 or a 4.1, which kind of surprised me a little bit because I thought we would just see a steady decline with yield and maturity. Typically, it goes the other way. Typically, you're up and to the right. And from where you're setting, that might be up and to the right. I get my left and my right here confused. But typically, the trend line with soybean yields is fuller season beans yield more. Now, some of you would be, coming up for air at that statement because you're in love with your early planted early beans. And we've had some years here where it just keeps getting drier and drier and drier and drier. And we can't beg an August rain. We can't beg a late August rain. We can't beg an early September rain. And if you're planting group, late 3s and early 4s, you need a lot of late August, early September rains. And, the reality, people talk, people have talked about, the climate's changing. We just don't get August rains anymore. Well, since Jesus and Moses, August in Illinois has been, Illinois wasn't here then, but the geography that is today Illinois was here then. It's been hot and dry in August in Illinois for a long time. August is one of the driest months in the year, if not the driest month in the year. It is the hottest month in the year. So I would maintain when August is hot and dry, that is not proof of climate change. That's what we call normal weather in August. So when you're dependent on August being wet, that don't happen very often. So, and I did have a guy point out to me, I kind of like this. He's like, we keep having 2 Augusts, meaning that, both August and September, super hot, super dry. And again, I can remember when when I went to college, in the late 80s, early 90s, and was in a non-air conditioned dorm at University of Illinois. There was always a stretch there in September where, damn, it's hot. It feels like August. So again, I don't know that that's all that weird, but, we have been on a stretch here lately where it's been exceptionally hot, exceptionally dry in August and September. And in that scenario, early planted early beans, might end up being the best because you're not getting enough moisture for your full season beans to take advantage of the fact that they genetically and biologically meaning they're growing longer, they're harvesting more sunlight. Biologically, a group 4 should have more yield potential than a group 3, should have more yield potential than a group 2. If the genetics are comparable. The genetic differences obviously influence that as well. So back to your first question, which I'm not sure I fully understand yet, but corn stalks and bottoms, I know what that means, and no-till next spring. So corn or beans, which crop, and an average later date or till level plant. Okay, so you're asking, do I no-till them a little bit later or till level and plant early? Okay, so I would say, my experience would say, you will get more than enough yield benefit out of the tillage and the early planting to cover the $30 cost for tillage easily. Now, I don't like doing tillage. I'm not a tillage guy. I'm a no-till guy. I love looking at trashy fields more than black dirt. So let's see. Shorter has advantage due to the environment in our area. Yeah. Yep. Okay. So yeah, I'm not surprised by that, Adam. I thought I would see that more widespread. And the other thing that most guys do, what I recommend, and that you plant your early beans first. So if you plant your early beans first and then you work later as you go, that means you're planting your fuller season beans later, typically. So so early maturity beans had two advantages this year. One, they get planted first, and two, they didn't get hurt by the late, hot, dry weather as much as fuller season beans did. But I would say the 3.6s and 3.9s hung in there really well with the 3.3s for a lot of people, and I really didn't see that decrease like I expected to. Now, I didn't necessarily see an increase either. It was more of a flatline response, but hung in there pretty well. So I think I got through Adam's flurry of questions there, and so we're going to get back to the list of complaints. So if you want to keep me off my list of complaints, sometimes you sellers, maybe like the agronomist, don't bring up the bad stuff. Good grief. Anyway. So it was appropriate. We had all these soybean questions here at the start, because my first complaint, and these are in no particular order. These are not in order of severity. They're not in alphabetical order. They're just in the order that they came into my feeble little mind. So my soybeans were flat. Soybeans are lodged bad. What up with that? So this year, different from previous years, recent history years, we had a relatively wet June. Now, the first half of June was pretty dry, but starting about mid-June on, it got wet. So soybeans do the bulk of their vegetative growing in late June and July. And we were wet in late June and July. And it was warm. And we had relatively good stands of soybeans, a lot of early planted soybeans, and a lot of soybeans grew aggressively vegetatively. Now, if we could train soybeans to not waste their energy growing vegetation and force them to put all that energy into blooms and pods and seeds, we'd have 100 bushel beans all over the place. Instead, we have a saying that says 80 bushel fodder, 40 bushel beans. and we had some of that going on this year, where soybeans just got very rank, very tall. And when your soybeans are 5 feet tall, and some of them were approaching 5 feet tall, they're eventually going to be 5 feet long, not 5 feet tall. A 5 foot tall soybean plant is not going to stand. So the height, the vegetative growth that we got in soybeans encouraged a lot of lodging. Our soybean breeders like to call that the high yield lean. The high yield lean is fine. The cut one way flat is what we want to avoid. And if you had some soybeans that were just terribly hard to harvest, my friend John, I know you'll be listening to this at some point. I can see you there cheering, since we're talking about lodging and soybeans. John always likes to tease me about our short corn. He's like, you guys are spending money making the wrong crop short. You need to shorten your soybeans up. And there are chemical ways to do that. Sometimes people get a little growly when people shorten get their beans chemically shortened. I had a farm of beans that was chemically shortened this year. So Halix GT, Callisto or mesotrione and atrazine, that'll shorten your beans right up. And my retail friends are going to make this right with me. But I had one farm of beans this year that was standing perfectly. They were nice to cut. They were good to cut. We rolled right through those. It was nice. They're about 20 bushel less than my lodge beans. So the price I paid to shorten them up was pretty harsh, but they were shorter, and they were standing perfectly. So anyway, I don't just have a list of complaints. I have a list of suggestions, and these are kind, gentle suggestions that you might consider that might help some of these complaints. So you got two options. If really you could, if you include chemical means of shortening soybeans, there are growth. It's very common in wheat. So if you're a high management wheat grower, you're probably using a plant growth regulator to shorten your wheat. There are plant growth regulators for soybeans to shorten them, and I'm not talking about a PGR type herbicide that maybe your soybeans aren't tolerant to. That will do it too. But these are products that were specifically designed to reduce vegetative growth. Now, people haven't necessarily had wonderful success always with those products, but there are things out there that you can play with if you want to. There are people that intentionally burn the hell out of their soybeans with like a Cobra type product, hoping that shortens them up, make them branch, those sort of things. But the one thing that has proven to be the most effective to reduce lodging and improve standability of soybeans is reducing your seeding rate. So cover your ears, seed sellers. We're going to get real here with what it means to reduce seeding rates in soybeans. 5 or 10,000 ain't going to cut it. I'm talking 30 or 40. If you got a variety, and I'm going to call it out, you got a variety like 27XF3 Asgrow, which I love, but you got to get the seeding rate down on that bean. If you're planting that thing early on good ground, 100,000, 110, that's about where I want your drop. And I hope only 80 of them come up. We got to get used to lowering seeding rates in soybeans, especially on productive ground. If you're fighting lodge beans and you're planting 140,000 seeds, you're creating your own problem. We got to get the seeding rates down. So don't be afraid to cut the seeding rate. You don't want to overplant to ensure against replanting. That's not a good strategy. Sometimes we have to replant. We'll deal with it. The other thing we got to do is we got to quit replanting fields with 70, 80,000 plants. They don't need replanted. Leave them alone. That's close to the ideal stand that we were looking for in the first place. If you add 100,000 trying to thicken up 70,000, you're just going to make a mess. So leave them alone. So I would say 75% of the soybean fields that get replanted annually do not need to be replanted, and they would have yielded better if you just left them alone. So crop insurance paying you to replant and seed companies giving you free seed to replant, you're hurting your yield. Now, I get it. It's free to do it. You're even getting paid to do it. But if your beans are yielding 5 or 10 bushel less because they lodge bad because you replanted them when you didn't have to, you're not making money doing that, even if you're getting paid to do it with free seed. So let's get comfortable looking at thin beans. Thin beans are better than thick beans. The other thing you can do is you can pay a little closer to your variety selection. And again, I'll pick on my own product, 27XF3. If you say, Lance, you're full of crap, I'm going to plant 140,000 seeds, and that's the right seeding rate. You guys are putting 140,000 in a bag. I like the math of 1 bag per acre. Well, I'm going to be honest with you. Don't plant 27XF3s if you think you have to plant 140,000 seeds. That's not going to end well for you or for us. Pick a 30XF4, pick a 26XF4, pick something that stands better than 27XF3s if you think you have to plant 140,000 seeds. You don't, but if you think you do, don't pick that bean. So variety selection can help as well. All right, moving on to my next complaint. We got to keep this rolling here. So my corn died. So that doesn't tell me a lot, but you should ask a probing question there, like, well, tell me more. How did it die? Why did it die? What did it die of? When did it die? Yada, yada, yada. But, I'd say three things that, we're going to assume your corn died prematurely because of disease. That's usually what people are referring to when they say my corn died. So option number 1, you can improve your fungicide program. You may think you've got a great fungicide program, but it can be better. Everybody can improve their. I put on 12 ounces of Delaro Complete. That's about the best you can do in one shot, but you could do that twice if you want to. You could do that following a V5 if you want to. So you can always improve your fungicide program. That's number one. Number two, and this is not a popular suggestion to growers. You could delay your planting. So planting your corn later will improve the health of your corn. And number three, you could look at planting different hybrids. So that's always an option as well. I like to say that with addressing all of these issues, it's a lot like voting. So let's say here's a scenario. You've got three candidates. You hate one, you dislike one, and you wish one was better. So what do you do there? You make a lesser of evils decision, and you pick the least awful candidate. Does that sound familiar to anyone? Isn't that typically what it's like when you vote? The person you wish you were voting for isn't an option. There's one you definitely don't want. There's one you kind of don't want. And there's one you think, I could probably live with that. So that's the one you vote for. So addressing these complaints is very much like that. You're not going to like any of the solutions to these problems because it's either going to cost you more money or it's going to complicate your management, or in the case of changing products, you're possibly selecting a lower yielding product to fix the problem you have. And sacrificing yield potential to address an agronomic issue is effective, but it's not popular. Okay, moving on. So my corn was too dry, meaning the grain was too dry when I harvested it. So I got four things for you on this one. So I got all kinds of lesser of evil options for you here. So number one would be plant a wider relative maturity range of corn. So we got too many people that their early hybrid is a 111 and their full season hybrid is a 116. That's 5 days RM. That's not enough. You need closer to 10. So if you're not planting any early corn, or you're not planting any really full season corn, expand your RM range, and that gives you more time to harvest more corn before it gets too dry. Number two, start harvest sooner. So a lot of people this year, kind of started at the normal time. This wasn't a normal growing season. And there were a lot of people that the first day they picked corn, it was already down to like 16 or 17%. It's like, oh, crap, this stuff's drier than I thought it was. I should have started a week sooner, maybe 2 weeks sooner. So we all could have started earlier this year, and that would have helped. This one's going to be a little bit controversial here. And I like controversial things on Ask the Agronomist because it stimulates good conversation, which is what we like here. I would suggest that when you were cutting 8% soybeans, complaining about cutting 8% soybeans, perhaps you should have quit cutting soybeans and went back and picked corn. Just a suggestion. We'll talk more about that as we get along through here. And I'll circle back again. Once again, my one thing that comes up several times in here is delay planting. So if you had planted your corn later, so I'll give you a good example from my farm at home. I finished corn harvest a week ago. I was picking corn that was planted on May 8th, and it was still 17% a week ago. And there hasn't been any April planted corn that was above 15 for about a month, probably. So if you plant later and you've got less crown rot and your plant is healthier and your plant lives longer and your plant black layers later, it will retain moisture. The grain will retain moisture longer into harvest. Just saying. Okay. So speaking of 8% soybeans, so that's my next complaint. My soybeans are coming out at 8% moisture. That's BS. I'm losing yield. You are about 5 bushel. lost yield just in moisture, not counting the extra shatter loss. So what do we do there? So again, you could plant a wider relative maturity range of soybeans. So I know one grower, and he got a little bit lucky, but better to be lucky than good. He planted a 3.3, a 3.6, a 3.9. He rolled right through. He started on the 3.3. When he got done with his 3.3, his 3.6 was ready to start. When he got done with the 3.6, the 3.9 was ready to start. He harvested 12-ish% soybeans all fall. Started on the 3.3, moved to the 3.6, moved to the 3.9, rolled right through all his beans, got them all out at a nice moisture. Now, that won't work that way again for him, but that's a good thing to try. It's also why you don't want to plant your full season bean first. Plant your early bean first, plant your full season bean last. That spreads your harvest window. If you plant your full season one first and your earlier one last, then everything gets closer together. You want to get them further apart. So give yourself more time to get them out. So and here's what I did on my farm. When soybeans were too dry, I quit harvesting soybeans and I focused on corn. I was worried about corn sustainability. I was worried about corn going down. It was early. I know cutting beans in November can be a challenge, but we were a long way from November. We had 8% soybeans in September. It was a long way to November. I quit cutting soybeans. Now, that's a risk. I get it. I'm not done harvesting soybeans either. I got 250 acres of beans left to do. And this time of year, it can be challenging to have good bean days, and the days are shorter, and you only got 7 or 8 hours a day you can harvest beans a lot of days this year, if at all. You've got somebody wants to put anhydrous on your bean field that you haven't harvested yet. You want to get fertilizer on your bean field that you haven't harvested yet. I get it. My grandfather was he was a stickler for if it's bean cutting weather, you cut beans. But we're going to have to do things a little different. So the other thing, it's a good time to call this out. So your lesser of evils option, you got 3 of them, kind of generally. This is in general, not specific. So here's your 3 options. And I'm not going to tell you which one you can pick, which one to pick. That's a personal decision. I will tell you got to pick one. And I'm going to give you one easy option. So the first option is to change nothing and continue complaining about the things that you don't like. That's option 1. So that's the easiest one because you don't have to do anything. You just got to get used to disappointment. You got to get used to complaining about stuff because bad things are going to continue to happen if you don't change anything. Option number 2 is plant different products that may have lower yield potential, but can address some of your complaints. Option number 3 is you up your game in management to reduce the issues you're having with the products you're planting today. So those are the 3 options. You got to pick one. So Adam's back with questions about planting. Let's see. You are not wrong about planting date on corn. Well, thanks, Adam. The problem is that early planted corn has been pretty successful for most, and you never know what the weather is going to do, and passing up an opportunity to plant is tough to do. Absolutely. I will be the first to admit, you and I have talked about this before, all the people, I would be one of those people. All of the people, crop consultants, those type of people, all the people that are kind of known for encouraging growers to be patient planting corn don't have much corn to plant. So it is relatively easy for us to suggest to the grower, well, you might want to just wait. But that's hard to do. And the philosophy that you plant when it's fit, regardless of calendar date, shout out to my good friend Chris Carlisle. Chris and I used to have that. We used to enjoy having that debate. There were people that thought Chris and I were going to get in fights over planting dates in corn. It was never that bad. But he's definitely a subscriber to the you plant when it's fit and things are going to be okay. And that's a solid recommendation. And if you got 10,000 acres of corn to plant, that's all you can do. You can't be picking and choosing your days. Where I get frustrated is the guy that's got 500 acres of corn to plant does not have to act like the guy who's got 10,000 acres of corn to plant. If you got 500 acres of corn to plant, a 16-row planter, and it's going to take you, 2.5 days to plant your corn crop, wait till May. But I get it. It's hard. So Adam's taking a page out of my book. He's asking a question that's actually a comment, but we agree on that one, Adam. Okay, so my last one on 8% soybeans. So you've probably never tried desiccating soybeans. That's basically spraying something on the soybeans as they're maturing to kill the plant so that the plant dries out as fast as the grain does. Because the problem with soybeans is the seeds in the pod dry really fast. The rest of the plant, juicy stem, green leaves, the grain is ready to harvest long before the plant is ready to harvest. So it's almost impossible to cut soybeans the first time they were 13 or 14%. Because the first day the grain is 13 or 14%, the plant itself is so green, you'll have a hard time getting it through the combine. There are products you can spray on soybeans to kill the plant rapidly so that when the grain is 13 or 14% the first time, the plant's dead and dry. Now, the management of that is tricky. The timing of that is tricky. The logistics of that are tricky. So it's not easy to do, but there are people exploring it, and it can be successful, but it takes a very high level of management. So if you want to explore that, I would seek out someone who's been doing it and get good advice and coaching on timing and product and rate and how to do it. Don't just play around with it, because you can make a mess of things in a hurry if you don't know what you're doing. And it takes a very, very high level of management to desiccate. If you want to try a field, that's not a big deal. But if you want to try to do that across a couple thousand acres of soybeans with different planting dates, different products, different maturities, different stages of growth, that's a challenge. So you gotta know what you're doing. Okay, I had root lodge corn. I don't like root lodge corn. So a couple things there. So you can select hybrids with stronger roots. Makes sense. And evaluate your tillage practices. So I think this year was a little bit unique. We had such a dry spring. We had such mellow soils. We had such perfect planting conditions. We didn't create compaction with planters and tillage tools in the spring like we normally do. And I had more than one scenario where it kind of appeared like a little bit of compaction actually helped corn plants stand better. Now, a lot of compaction that restricts your root growth, that's not going to make your corn plant stand better. But when you've got corn roots that are growing in really loose, mellow soil, and you get a good amount of rain, which we had a good amount of rain in June and July, and you've got a wet, saturated soil that's really loose and really mellow, and you've got a good root system, but it's holding on to something that's really loose and really mellow, it's easier for that plant to tip over. So I had more than one guy who's a strip tiller that field cultivated the ends of their fields and observed that, gosh, my corn in my strips is root lodged pretty bad, and my corn where I field cultivated standing fine. Well, I guarantee you that's because we put in a little bit of a compaction layer with that field cultivator, and it helped anchor that plant. So it's crazy to say that a little bit of compaction can be a good thing, but I honestly think it was in some cases this year. This year was a little different. We had very little green snap this year and a lot of root lodging. So some of that was because we had good moisture conditions. When you got dry soils, you don't get root lodging. You have to have moisture in a soil for root lodging, and we've had a lot of dry in recent years. We've been very dry in May and June, and the soil was hard and dry, and that leads to more green snap than it does to yeah. So Adam made the point. Rip beans were down, tilled beans were down more than no-till beans. So yeah, I'm not surprised by that. So your tillage system can influence standability of crops as well. Okay, so corn stock lodge, a lot of stock lodge corn out there this year. So I'm going to step on some toes here, but my first one was harvest more timely. And this goes back to my corn got too dry. It goes back to starting earlier, and it goes back to, we are harvesting way too much corn at 13, 14, 15, 16%. That's Russian roulette there, guys. I don't care what the calendar date is. If you're harvesting 15% corn, you're harvesting corn that's about to fall down. And sometimes when it's about to fall down, it falls down before you get there. So a lot of people were really frustrated that, well, it's only October 20th. My corn should be, it should be able to stand till October 20th. Well, it aged in dog years this year. It was a lot older than it looked, or older than the calendar said. I mean, you got to go, you don't go by the calendar date, you go by the grain moisture. And if you're harvesting corn that's 12, 13, 14%, and it's still standing, you should be thankful that it's still standing at 12, 13, 14%, because often it will not be. And we have just got to figure out what do we need to do differently to harvest less 12, 13, 14, 15% corn and harvest more 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24% corn, because that's where the yield is. That's where the good standability is. That's where the good harvestability is. That's where the good days are. The bad days are where you're trying to pick 12, 13, 14, 15, 16% corn. So we gotta figure out how we can, you can't have 3 X9 combines to farm 2,000 acres. I get it. You can't have 50 people. You can't have 50 trucks. There's a limit to how much manpower and equipment you can have. We got to figure out how to give ourselves more time to get corn harvested at a reasonable moisture. Now, every year is different. We're gonna have different weather next year. We probably won't have 94-degree days with 15% humidity and 30-mile-an-hour winds. I mean, that's basically like being in a corn dryer standing. And the corn black layered so early this year. I mean, we had corn that was well into dent stage by the 1st of August. We had corn that was black layered before August 20th. When you black layer that early, you're going to dry like that. And these old sayings of, corn will dry about half a point a day in a field. If it's 94, sunny, windy, and 15% humidity, it's going to be closer to a point and a half a day drying in the field, not half a point. So the earlier your corn matures, the faster it's going to dry. That's another reason why later planted corn holds on to its moisture, because it black layered later. Corn doesn't start to dry down until after black layer. If your corn hasn't black layered yet, it's not drying when it's 90 degrees. It's still growing when it's 90 degrees. So the later in the growing season, or the later in the calendar that it black layers, the slower it's going to dry, because you're going to have fewer of those hot, dry days. Ross had a couple questions here. So first one, I've seen a lot of pretty bad high sand yields this year across practices. What does high meaning sandy soils, Ross? Is that your question? And then so you're talking corn. So I've seen the same thing in Mason County. So I honestly think I saw the worst nematode feeding I've seen in years on corn roots when I was digging corn roots and sand. When you've got a So I'm going to draw a picture here and try to illustrate this. It probably won't be great, but I'll try. So there's my healthy corn root system. Hopefully you can see that. Might be a little bit of a glare there. But that's my healthy corn root system. And now I'm going to try to draw a cis nematode corn root system. It looks like Adam Henniger's beard. You know, Adam's got a thick, bushy beard. If you see thick, dense, bushy roots like that, that's bad. The only reason roots grow like this instead of like this is because they keep getting eaten off, and they branch and they bush and they branch and they bush and they branch and they bush. That's what not cis nematodes, that's what corn nematodes do. Cis nematodes kind of do the same thing, but we're talking corn nematodes here. That's what corn nematodes do to ruin a corn plant. And I personally think that anytime I was digging corn roots in a field that I know has corn nematodes, I just think the corn nematode damage this year on sandy soils was atrociously bad, worse than normal. The other thing that I observed this year, that the guys on sand usually don't care about rootworm, and I would agree that rootworm usually are not an issue on sandy soils. But I was digging some corn roots and some corn on corn fields in Mason County under irrigation on some pretty damn sandy ground, and I think I seen some rootworm feeding as well. So most sand growers are not planting traded corn, rootworm traded corn, because rootworms don't like sandy soils. They do not do well in sandy soils, but that doesn't mean there are none there. So I think I saw some pretty severe root issues on sand this year from nematodes. So, you know, whether that explains it all or not, I don't know. But I had a lot of growers in Mason County report the same thing to me, Ross, that, usually I'm, 230, 240, 250 corn, corn on corn irrigated under a pivot. And, it was sub 180, sometimes sub 150. And that was with a lot of fertilizer and a lot of management and a lot of fungicide and doing a lot of things right, and just some pretty tough. Now, I had another thing that makes me think it's a nematode issue, and possibly a little bit of rootworm too. I had a grower that he had a hybrid that did not handle that corn on corn sand environment very well at all. And he actually thought he had a seed quality problem, and he carried some of that same seed into a rotated field on sandy soil underwater, and it was 100 bushel better. So there was a dramatic difference between corn on corn. And a lot of that ground is corn on corn because you got the water, and nobody likes irrigating soybeans. And so I guess if you're seeing a huge difference between corn on corn and rotated ground, that could be a nematode issue too, because that year of soybeans, is going to lower your corn nematode pressure. It could also, there could also be a few rootworms there on the continuous corn. So it's hard to say generically, but I would agree that something in this environment, there was a lot of irrigated corn on sand that was well off of 5 and 10 year yield averages for lots of growers. So you're not alone there, Ross. Okay, so moving on. So we're in my corn stock lodge here. So harvest more timely, improve your fungicide program. We've talked about that one before. You can change hybrids if you want. And again, plant a wider relative maturity range, which what that's going to enable you to do is spread your harvest out. My next one, I actually wish I heard this one more often, because I think this is often true, but this isn't the way people look at it. So I'm going to challenge your thinking a little bit here. So why do you buy a fungicide for corn? To protect your plant from disease, improve plant health, improve yield, improve standability, improve harvestability. Those would be the reasons. So let's say you bought a fungicide this year and your corn died from disease. If you bought a fungicide to protect your corn from disease and your corn dies from a disease, why does everybody blame the hybrid? Nobody blames the fungicide. Now, my company sells both, so we could be guilty either way. But it seems like the fungicide always gets a pass. And your corn died from disease after you sprayed a fungicide. But yet, everybody's like, well, I sprayed fungicide. What's wrong with your hybrid? I'm like, what's wrong with your fungicide? So anyway, I wish more people, had this complaint that my fungicide didn't work. But let's say you had more disease than you wanted. And let's say you haven't ever said my fungicide didn't work, but let's say you had more disease than you wanted. So what can you do? So you can use a better product. That's number one. You can increase the rate of either the good product or the bad product, but increasing rate's important. You can improve application, which is challenging. I know you're probably not doing your own application. You're at the mercy of someone else to do that. So that's limited what you can do there, but there are ways to improve your application. You can change your timing. So there's still way too many people waiting for brown silk. I got a list of things I want on my tombstone. Test weight has nothing to do with yield. Would be first on the list. It's okay to plant corn in May. Doesn't mean you're a bad farmer. That would be on the list. And third would be you shouldn't wait till brown silk to put your VT fungicide on. Would be on the list. So if any of you, I haven't bought my tombstone yet, but if any of you want to buy me a tombstone and engrave something on it, those would be things that I would like to have on my tombstone. So, and then the last one was make multiple applications, which I know is not popular. It's expensive, costs a lot of money. I get it. We're back to those, a lot of lesser of evils decisions there, because there's none of those that you like, because all of them cost you more money. But the reality is, if you want to make your fungicide work better, it's going to cost more money. Your other option is you can, plant a hybrid that maybe yields a little bit less, but doesn't need as much help from a fungicide. And that maybe in your mind that's a better, lesser of evils option. Okay, so this is the closest I got this year to my fungicide didn't work complaint, as I don't like streaks. I don't want to see the streaks in my fungicide. So there's really only two things you can do there. If you increase the rate, that will hide the streaks a little. The only other thing you can do is improve application, and that's really tough to do. I've talked to some aerial applicators about reducing their swath width, which is gonna over apply on the edges, which I'm willing to pay for as a grower. Because really what you need to get rid of the streaks is you need about 1.5 on the streak, because you don't get good penetration into the canopy. That's why the streak is there. It's not that the rate's low, it's the coverage is poor. And you're only getting a little bit on the, you're just getting it on the top few leaves. It's not getting down into the canopy on the edge of the pattern. Now, if we puked on like a 1.5x rate, on the edge, we'd get decent control out there. But if you're already at the full label rate, what that means is the applicator is going to be exceeding the maximum rate allowed by the label, which we follow labels here. So I can't ask my applicators to do that, even if I'm willing to pay for it, which I would be, because they're making an off-label application. And yes, so Ross calls out 6606 is an excellent hybrid for 2-pass. You know what's even a better hybrid for 2-pass? 6835. Those hybrids really, really, really appreciate season-long disease protection, and they will reward you with some big-time yields if you do that. So I agree with you, Ross. Okay, so and then my last one here. I couldn't harvest fast enough. I started early. I was going hard. I did everything I could. I couldn't get there fast enough. And that was true this year. That won't be true every year, but this year that was true. And the only suggestion I have for that is, again, increase your relative maturity spread so that you've got some earlier stuff so you can start earlier and start earlier. So you either, if you're going to start earlier, you're going to do one of two things. You're going to pick wetter corn, which again, I get it. It's a challenge. I haul corn to the bin in a gravity wagon. You ever tried to get 26% corn out of a gravity wagon? You open the door, you let half the wagon run out, and then you climb your fat butt up the ladder and you jump down there in the corn and you push the rest of it out the door. I don't want to do that. So I don't pick 26% corn in a gravity wagon. But there are ways to handle 26% corn. You just can't use gravity wagons. So anyway, that's my list of complaints. I've got another page here of stuff that I might save that maybe for a future episode. We're coming up here on time. Great questions today, guy. The other thing it just dawned on me, and Adam and Ross are both Ask the Agronomist veterans, and they know that the way you get entered into our drawing at year end for prizes is you get a ticket, in the pot for every question you asked. So now Adam, and Ross, a little bit, you too. I'm gonna have to do some editing there because not everything you asked was a question. Some of those were statements. You do not get tickets into the raffle entry for statements. Only questions. So I'm not gonna give you full credit for some of those, but I sure appreciate the interaction. Love my audience, and everybody stay safe, and thank you for joining here this morning. We may be a little off schedule. I've got a meeting that conflicts with 2 weeks from today, so I'm gonna suggest we may wait 3 weeks before the next episode, but we'll get an invite out ahead of time to let you know when the next episode is going to be. But we may get a little bit off schedule here, and again, that's then the one after that could be the season finale. So hard to believe we're winding up season 5 here on Ask the Agronomist. That's crazy. I can't hardly believe that we've done this for 5 years now. But I am getting old, so it is in fact possible. So anyway, everybody stay safe. You're out, a lot of anhydrous going on, harvest wrapping up. If you're still harvesting like I am, you're getting tired of harvesting. There's down corn. Please be careful. Harvesting down corn is one of the most dangerous things you can do because you're in and out of the combine a lot. You're around the head a lot. Don't be pushing stuff into the head when the head's running, but just be careful. Long days. Everybody's tired. Everybody's frustrated. Everybody's stressed. Everybody's pissed. And that's when really bad stuff happens. So please be safe. Get back home every night to the family. And we'll be back with you in 2 or 3 weeks. I'm not sure, but we'll let you know. So take care. Thank you.